Hi tea sippers, welcome to an all-new episode of Coffee Tea with Dr. Long. This is your host, Mark Long. Hold on, let me take a sip. Okay, now let's spill that tea. Today, we're going to dive into some politics, but we're also going to talk a little bit about some reality TV. But most importantly, I'm going to sprinkle in a little bit more topics that I think it will be great to start with the new year. We're going to talk about queer language and what that looks like from over the decades. We're also going to dive into a special segment where you write in about topics you would like to discuss. Get ready. Let's be fresh. Let's go. Hey, tea sippers, let's get into that politics. So, Zohran Mamdani is now officially the 112th mayor of New York City. He was sworn in at midnight, so that was yesterday. Let's hear what he had to say.
That I should use this opportunity to encourage the people of New York to ask for little and expect even less. I will do no such thing. The only expectation I seek to reset is that of small expectations. Beginning today, we will govern expansively and audaciously. We may not always succeed, but never will we be accused of lacking the courage to try. To those who insist that the era of big government is over, hear me when I say this. No longer will City Hall hesitate to use its power to improve New Yorkers' lives. For too long, we have turned to the private sector for greatness while accepting mediocrity from those who serve the public. I cannot blame anyone who has come to question the role of government, whose faith in democracy has been eroded by decades of apathy. We will restore that trust by walking a different path.
Wow, so a couple things to get into here. So he is a 34-year-old Democrat, Democratic mayor. I think he identifies as a socialist, but most importantly, I think it's important to mention a few things. So Mamdani is actually New York's first, I believe he's the first Muslim and the first South Asian and first African-born person to be mayor of New York City. That's quite the milestone. A lot of different firsts there, but he also campaigned on just governing the city and speaking to a perspective that reflects the tenants in the city, but also, most importantly, those who are looking for some change in childcare and also access to transportation and rent freezing with the cost of living going up. And Zohran Mamdani has quite the career in terms of just kind of being transparent with what he feels and what he wants to bring to the table in New York City. As reported from AP News, they're saying that Mamdani actually has a lot of controversy in regards to just kind of this national attention of his race and how he identifies with being Islam or part of the Islam religion, and there's a lot of Islamophobic rhetoric going around. And he also faced a lot of backlash from the decision to use the Quran, which for his swearing in for mayor. So it'll be interesting to see this continue, because it's most likely going to continue because we do live in a racist country, which is weird to say because a lot of people try to convince us otherwise. And I think Zohran Mamdani is living proof that that's the case. But most importantly, I'm excited for New York City. I'm also excited for the changes and the fact that he's going to be speaking to the different perspectives of people who come from different backgrounds, including immigrants in the city. So I'm excited for them, and I'm excited for what's to come for sure. Moving on. So Jack Smith and Donald Trump obviously have their little kerfuffle, but the former special counsel Jack Smith testified behind closed doors to the House Judiciary Committee, and he was testifying in regards to the January 6th incident with Donald Trump, and he insisted that his prosecutions were based off of proof and beyond a reasonable doubt, which he also denied there was no political influence. And we know this is something that Jack Smith has said before. Obviously, the Trump administration is trying to go after him because they're looking at this as an opportunity to have some give back, but most importantly, to try to scare people not to prosecute Donald Trump again and not to have him have any restrictions with his power in the White House. So, the Epstein files. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. So, Since the Christmas break, there has been a lot that has happened in regards to the files and more information that is coming out consistently. What we know right now is that Donald Trump is for sure in the Epstein files, but we know more than half of the files, I believe 75% of the original release of the files were redacted. And then we also saw that over break, there were millions and millions of more files that were coming out. And what the Department of Justice is saying is that they missed the legal deadline, obviously, to release the files, but there's a reason why. And they're saying that they have to go based off what protection of the survivors and people that are involved in these cases. A lot of the survivors' lawyers right now are starting to realize that there are far less files that have been unreleased, meaning that they are hiding some files and still reviewing them past the deadline. There's also some new information coming out about footage just happening, prison camera footage in regards to the day that Epstein died. Donald Trump mentioned repeatedly regarding the files that, oh goodness, that there's 8 flights of records that include Donald Trump's name in regards to transportation. It kind of was disgusting as I was just reading it. So basically, long story short, it gives that Donald Trump is still a huge, huge problem here. Not to mention the fact that we know that these files have been redacted, but most importantly, we know that the Department of Justice and the Trump administration is hiding pedophilia. They're also hiding the fact that Donald Trump actually promised the release of the Epstein files as a part of his campaigning. And he also argued that there's a lot of powerful people in America that are hiding behind this awful tragedy. And now that he has power, it's interesting how that has been a complete change and how he has recently told people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, as she just released some information, which was quite a bombshell, that her conversation with Donald Trump consisted of him letting her know that he doesn't want a lot of close people to him to be taken down by her vote to release the Epstein files. And I believe Lauren Boebert, whatever her name is, she also voted to release the files. So there's been a lot of pushback directly from Donald Trump to current members of Congress. And as we see, there are a lot of current members of Congress that are leaving the administration or leaving their roles just because they're completely disconnected from their base or completely disconnected from the cult that is trying to protect Donald Trump with these Epstein files and get away with raping thousands of victims. And I think this year what we're going to see is that supporters of the president and his own opponents are going to continue to criticize this. But most importantly, there's still going to be the 40,000 pages of new information published last week. That's basically all we get. We know that there's millions of files still to be released, and we also know that the Epstein's devices in the States, according to the 2020 emails between the Federal Bureau of Investigation, that there could be millions with different information and different data that is currently still out there, but nothing is happening and there's no movement. There is some conversation last week from the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, and he wrote on social media that lawyers are working around the clock. And clearly we see different information, but the main thing that we're not hearing right now is these victims should be the priority of this administration, but most importantly of the country right now, and making sure they get justice. And we know that the Trump administration had no problem releasing all those files and those records with those photos, but there's also information that we know is being safeguarded. And we should learn more about that as the year goes on. But right now, Donald Trump is living his best life. He's enjoying his holidays, and I believe Congress is on vacation right now. So it'll be interesting to see how this narrative gets completely flipped once things start to open back up and once our lawmakers start meeting and our government starts meeting to actually figure out what's going on. Anyway, let's move on into another topic. So some new laws taken into effect in 2026. We know that 38 states passed new laws regulating AI. So this specifically talks about election interference, but most importantly, they're cracking down on how information is being used in terms of misinformation and how it's being used in terms of political gain. Now, as the country is moving forward, some states are looking for ways to soften the blow of higher healthcare premiums with the use of AI, but most importantly, they're also looking to figure out how AI can be incorporated in a lot of these medical fields where a lot of countries are looking at, or excuse me, a lot of states are looking at these deep fakes, meaning, you know, there's videos and audios out there that are digitally altered, which could create false representation and information, especially when reporting on news or serious topics relating to politics, as we just mentioned. Most importantly, a lot of other things are happening this year in regards to some new policies, but states are also looking at paid family medical leave. Right now we have Maine, Delaware, and Minnesota that will have paid family medical leave, which their policies have actually gone into effect this year. And they join several other states such as Maryland, Vermont, and Washington, along with past legislation for a few other states. And paid and family medical leave allows employees to receive wages when they take leaves, for example, or leaves of absence, if you will, or when they give birth, or if there's a family member that's sick, or there's some kind of bereavement. So there's a lot of benefits when it comes to that. Now, let's look at more information. So, Virginia is now limiting social media use for kids under the age of 16 to 1 hour per platform per day. And that's unless parents override this. So, this is something that recently came out. We saw that there are other countries that are looking at limiting access to social media. For example, in Australia, sometime, I believe it was a couple weeks ago, they did a mandate across the country completely eliminating social media access on specific platforms for people under the age of 18, which is, in their way, is looking at a way of monitoring online information and misinformation, but also protecting the safety of kids who have access to information that is not regulated. So we'll see how that happens and if that does come into play here in the United States. But we see states like Virginia already moving to start a little bit more conversations and policies around this. All right, let's continue. So we know that healthcare premiums are going up this year because we've covered that last season, but now let's talk about what this looks like overall. So there's enhanced ACA tax credits that were expired on January 1st of 2026. So this was after Congress failed to extend them, as we talked about. But this is clearly going to trigger major premium spikes for millions of Americans across the country. Some states are seeing like 20 to 30% increases, with Nevada projected to about 34%. So that's about like $800 more a year per family of four. That's ridiculous. Now, we know that the marketplace premiums for the lowest cost plan are projected to average about $50 a month after tax credits, up from $37 last year. But what Medicaid fund cuts and the AKA subsidies expirations, with both of those happening, we're going to see a lot happening in regards to people struggling to just make ends meet with this. Let's take a listen.
Millions of Americans will be paying more for health insurance this year. That's because tax credits that help people pay for plans on the federal marketplace, known as Obamacare, have expired.
Sadly, it's no longer going to be affordable.
Jeremy Coolish says he lost his job in the spring, forcing him and his wife to get insurance through the marketplace. He says their current plan costs $392 with tax credits, but those subsidies are now gone.
Without subsidies, it would be something like $1,608.
Millions of Americans are in a similar dilemma. KFF estimates 24 million people signed up for insurance through the Affordable Care Act in 2025. Of those enrollees, roughly 92% received subsidies. Without those tax credits, KFF says average annual premium costs could rise by 114%.
People simply can't afford some of the premiums that have been happening in this coming year.
Zonjanice Jacobs is an insurance navigator in Florida. Every state employs navigators who are available to answer your questions for free.
They know what kind of prescriptions they're going to need or what kind of doctor's appointments they're going to need to go to or other procedures that they're going to have. We make sure that we walk through the process by looking at each one of those plans that fit within the confines of their budget.
Here are some other options. Many states have expanded the income qualifications for Medicaid. Go to healthcare.gov/lower costs to see if you qualify.
So that's interesting. So definitely if you're receiving Medicaid, you should definitely go to the website and figure out if there has been some kind of adjustment income-wise. But let's get into this a little bit more. So this is Reno, which is a local news company. And there's an article by Susan Potter, and she goes in to talk about Republicans. And she says, Republicans in Congress refuse to extend expiring pandemic-era subsidies, which made Affordable Care Act plans on Nevada HealthLink less expensive. So this is interesting if we look at it from a state perspective. So what they're saying, as mentioned before, is that there's going to be about 800 a year of an increase for a family of four. But most importantly, what we're also going to notice is that, you know, a lot of people in these rural communities aren't really going to be very happy. We know folks are already like an hour away from their healthcare services, and we know this is going to be difficult for people to even just go to the doctor or trust going to the doctor when premiums are already up, and then costs are going to be high in terms of copays. So it's going to be a bit ridiculous, and I think this is all because Republicans are jerks, especially in Congress right now. There's an opportunity to prevent this from happening, and you had people that were talking about their constituents and people from their districts that were basically singing a tune about this and how important it was to prevent this from happening. So we'll keep updated about this, but I do suggest everyone to check out the website. Check out websites in their state, most importantly. But if you have any more information you want to look at, I would go to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services if you're receiving services, and hop on there and see if there's any other information that you could learn about. For example, like the grandfathered healthcare plans and internal appeals and compliance stuff and dependencies and all that. So just make sure you're protecting yourself. Okay, moving on to another topic. So AI is heating up, especially this coming year. So TechCrunch, I believe, or TechCrunch, reports that 2026 is a year for AI shifts, meaning that there's going to be smaller models, embedded with AI on devices, and also just going to be real-world deployment of AI in terms of it being more embedded into our everyday world. Microsoft highlights that AI is becoming a digital colleague in regards to assisting people in medicine, research, software development, and the workplace in general. But most importantly, it's providing more context-aware systems for people. And industries are likely going to be using this for analyticals and also for quantum hybrid models and building out enterprise-scale adoptions and information to help them look at trends over the years. So it'll be very cool to see how that's going to come into play in regards to how we receive information. But as we talked about AI in the past, 2026 is going to be the year where we're going to see it just kind of be consistently in our life. So we'll see if that looks like we're going to see it at the drive-thru, in the grocery store, if it's going to be incorporated in self-checkout, if they're going to bring those back. What is it going to look like? So we'll see. Now, this year is important as well because we have the midterms coming up this year, and voting is super at high stakes right now, especially given what happened with the 2024 election and a lot of people on the left that sat out the election. Most importantly, states across the country are in this heated redlining or redistricting. That was a Freudian slip, but redistricting battle, and we see it happening in Texas, in California, in Florida. Illinois has really gotten to it. Kansas, Maryland, Virginia, just to name a few. And right now, we only see about 66 House races, which are considered competitive. So basically, 17 of those are really true toss-ups. And Georgia is once again a pivotal battleground state this year, with a competitive Senate race and a governor's race that's drawing a lot of attention. So just like we saw in previous elections, I believe it was in 2022 midterms, we're going to likely see that again. But most importantly, we're going to see basically what we see in every other year that there isn't a national election. How important it is for the midterms and how important it is for people to vote, because right now we know that there aren't a lot of checks and balances in the government, and things are moving very authoritarian right now. We just talked a little bit about healthcare premiums. I can't imagine what else is next. We see that there's going to be more coming in a pipeline in regards to immigration and more crackdowns on that. So, yeah, definitely get out there and vote. I think this is the year that we want our voices to be heard, and we want to fight back against that bullshit. Okay, let's talk about the federal holidays this year. So a lot of the holidays are lining up the way we want them to. So that's good. So we have a few holidays that are going to be on, I think, let me see, going down the list. Christmas this year is going to be on a Friday. And I believe that, what are we getting? We're getting Independence Day, I believe, is going to be on a weekend day as well. And a few other days. So that's going to be very good. So, you know, things are going to be looking better. I believe Halloween is going to be on a Saturday. So just, you know, mark your calendars. Obviously, you know, just schedule how you schedule, but it's good when things are aligned more towards the weekend because you don't have to worry about too much time off. All right, so ending things here, I want to end things just by echoing that MAGA is definitely turning on Trump. Supporters are blasting the White House over his handling of the Epstein files, but most importantly of the handling of healthcare premiums right now for millions of Americans. But most importantly, there has been declining enthusiasm among Republicans who self-identify as MAGA, with Trump's approval rating now at 42% and his disapproval rating at 58% in December. Gen Z men, right? So once supported Trump in droves, and now they're increasingly rejecting MAGA, with only 32% among 18 to 29-year-olds staying aligned with his influence and with the trajectory of the Republican Party as it relates to being MAGA. A lot of people within the party are now identifying as America First, fighting back at Trump's ability to pull back on foreign affairs and focus more specifically on people in this country. Also, moving forward is this huge notion of this manosphere influencer, right? So we have Schultz, we have Rogan and Dylan who have become publicly criticizing Trump and the cultural shift and the different things that are happening in the administration. And mind you, a lot of these people were definitely MAGA and definitely Trump supporters initially when it came down to the options of for president this year or this time around. And we see Turning Point USA events. MAGA voters are expressing strong disapproval of Attorney Pam Bondi, whatever her name is, especially over the handling of the Epstein files. So we know there's going to be quite a bit to look at this year, but this is going to be the year of complete, in my opinion, change, but also the year of hold on to your seats because the tea is going to be piping hot all year long. Thank you. Hi, tea sipper. So let's talk about some reality TV and pop culture, but I kind of want to start off with something that's on a lot of our mind. Heated Rivalry. The 6-episode breakout show that pretty much premiered towards the end of 2025, which is about two gay hockey players and how they come together and basically become lovers. For lack of a better term or a better phrase. Let's listen to NPR about their perspective about why is this important for us to see homosexuality, but most importantly, a gay couple and a gay romantic show that is gaining a lot of popularity.
When I look back at the year that has flown by, and I think of the queer shows that have come out, Boots, Adults, Overcompensating, and how each of those did well, but they haven't reached this level of mainstream appeal. I do wonder if, shows can experiment a bit with sexuality and showing sex on camera and really digging into the intimacy of these characters. I think there's a hunger for that for all audiences. And I hope that it skews more towards queer people because we are in an era where we're seeing stories at the margins being rolled back, essentially. And in this kind of anti-DEI era, I hope that the TV industry doesn't cave to that.
That's a really good point.
And yeah, it is a really good point. And I think most importantly, when it comes to shows like Heated Rivalry, we've had shows in the past that specifically tread at the line when it comes to homosexuality or representation in regards to LGBTQ+, like Glee, and then we've had other shows like Grey's Anatomy and things that were kind of mainstream primetime television. And I think when it comes to the streaming world, we're kind of shifting in an era of just kind of having shows that immediately gravitate and grab your attention. And the thing about Heated Rivalry, just as what he said in regards to the sex and the playfulness and the characters and the dynamic, a lot of what happens on the show is very relatable to a lot of the audience. But most importantly, it's relatable in terms of coming out and being comfortable with who you are. And the time and place. I think the show takes place in around 2014 to 2016 era. So that's when we saw a lot more conversation around same-sex marriage, and then more openly gay sports players were coming out at that time. So it's just a really good feel-good show. I think Heated Rivalry is one of those shows where it causes a lot of conversation. There's a lot of talk right now about how the show is streaming a lot with women, right? Especially straight women. And not necessarily because of the sex, but that is helpful. But most importantly is how it's portrayed on camera. We see a different side of hookup culture here where it's also introduced. But we also get to understand the fact that these two people are falling for each other. And there's care, there's intimacy, there's opportunities of conversation that are otherwise challenging that a lot of people who are LGBTQ plus can relate to. There's also this notion of, you know, maybe some places where you're from aren't proud of it and you could face a lot of harsh criticism and punishment and what that means for family dynamics and personal life. So Heated Rivalry is a great show. I finished all 6 episodes. I do suggest watching it if you are queer or if you are someone who's just looking to learn more. But most importantly, I think we need to start having more shows, to NPR's point, about having some representation out there, but just having it out there for conversation, I think is super important. Okay, so I wanted to start off with that, but I also want to talk about a few upcoming things this year that are in the pipeline. Of course, Traitors, season 4 is happening. We have a few housewives on there. Dorinda, we have Candace, we have, who else? We have Caroline Stanberry is also making an appearance. We have Portia Williams. In addition to the Traitors, we have the season premiere of RuPaul's Drag Race happening on January 2nd, tonight at 7 o'clock p.m., which I will give my perspective on the queens in the next podcast. We're also getting through Canada's Drag Race right now, and which is a fabulous season. We have some great personalities. And also what Canada does well is they lean into the production value in terms of us getting to know the queens, and I feel like they're doing a better job with folding that out. Now, with this year, I can't tell you who's going to win the show, kind of like how last year was produced, which is actually a good thing to keep me on my toes. But I will keep you all updated how I feel as the show goes on, because, you know, that's what happens with reality TV. Moving on, some other shows that are coming out this year is The House of Villains. We just started looking into that, and apparently Plain Jane from RuPaul's Drag Race is going to make an appearance on that, along with Tiffany Pollard and a few other likely names like Jackie Christie. Another bombshell, as we shift gears into the Bravo world, is that Nene Leakes is returning to the Bravo universe. That's right. Now, there's been reports that she's still in discussion and her return to Bravo and to NBC Universal. But if you all remember last year, NBC Universal and Nene Leakes actually patched things up, and there were conversations that were had. I think there's just more conversations that needed to be had production-wise and moving forward and trying to introduce her back to the network. And I think they found the perfect opportunity, which is to release the Ultimate Girls Trip, which is a spinoff of the Ultimate Girls Trip, which is created into a spinoff, of the Ultimate Road Trip for Housewives, which is a spinoff of Ultimate Girls Trip, is what I was trying to say. And we see some great conversation there in regards to who's going to be on there. So from what I'm hearing in the pipeline is that we're going to get Nene Leakes, obviously, but in addition to Nene Leakes, word on the street is that Vicky will be joining her. Along with Vicky, I think we're also going to be getting I think Heather Dubrow. Hold on, let me pull it up. No, it was Kyle Richards, Heather Dubrow. Hold your seat there, T-Sippers, because you know I'm going to give it to you. Yeah. Vicky, I see Nene Leakes, Giselle, Kyle Richards, Mary Cosby from Salt Lake City. So there's quite some names here in regards to who is going to be on it. And I think this is going to be a super fun show. I think it's good to get the wives all back together, but most importantly, the different personalities. I think Luann is also on the list of housewives that are going to be on Ultimate Road Trip. Now, Bravo hasn't mentioned anything about when we're going to get the show, but I assume if they're filming sometime this winter or sometime this spring, that we'll likely get the show towards the end of the year, which will be great to look forward to. Obviously, Real Housewives of Beverly Hills just started, so we're going to continue with that. Some interesting news that happened. Heather Dubrow actually released a photo of basically saying that diamonds are forever, with her husband Terry Dubrow commenting on it, kind of celebrating this newfound immersing herself into the Hollywood world and the Los Angeles world and that kind of thing, which we know that Heather is very, 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 very interested in relocating there and living there, and that being her full-time focus. And we know that something sits with her in regards to the Real Housewives of Orange County, because that's where she got her start on reality television after her sting and after her run in being like a C-list or D-list actress, if you will. And it seems like Heather is trying to hang up her orange for a diamond, which will be interesting. So I like it. I think Heather Dubrow will be great on any show that she's on. But most importantly, I think the way they should roll that out is that have Heather finish off this last season with Vicky. And then we can, like, have Heather rejoin Beverly Hills. There's nothing to it than to have a housewife on two shows that are kind of airing simultaneously. We saw that happen with Phaedra Parks in Married to Medicine. How she started with Married to Medicine and she was on her second season. So much drama her second season. We saw her ex come onto the show. It wasn't giving what it was giving because Phaedra was there, but there was no Married to Medicine. It was almost kind of like she was misplaced. But then slowly she left that show and rejoined the Real Housewives of Atlanta. And we saw the full rollout of having just a full year of Phaedra. This was also after her stint on The Traitors. So I think we're looking at something similar for Heather Dubrow. It will be nice to see Heather make that jump from OC to Beverly Hills, but also we can have Heather on something else. And just the idea of her relocating, I think is going to give so much life to Beverly Hills. I think they have the life already. I'm not saying that Garcelle's absence is missed on my part. It is. But I'm not saying that. I think if we're throwing in other ladies like Heather, I think there's an opportunity for personality shifts, for dynamics to change. I think we're already seeing that with the new girl, Amanda. I haven't watched the most recent episode, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of drama there. We know that there's going to be fighting between her and Erica. But moving into after this season, if we just keep all the ladies, depending on how they do, and add Heather in the bunch, I can see Heather cozying up with Rachel Zoe. I can see her cozying up with Kyle Richards. Obviously, all these ladies have a history. They're all from California, from that area. They're all on Housewives. They're all well off in their own right. So they've crossed paths, of course. So it'll be interesting to see Heather with Sutton and seeing how they bake bread. I think the drama is going to be very about, like, who spent the most on this and your house costs that, which is more of what we want to see in Housewives and less of that weird, like, awkward, like, oh my God, who's racist? You know what I mean? Or who's homophobic? Because if you're homophobic, you shouldn't be on Housewives. So, like, moving forward with OC, just ask Gretchen because I'm tired. And what I hope what they have cooking up in OC is good because with Heather Dubrow leaving, I think that's the main story that I want to follow. I would love to follow Vicky and all the other ladies, but right now, who's the cast? Tamara? Tamara's not that girl. Well, she is in terms of breathing life into it, but now that you're bringing back Vicky, there's going to be a shift in that. So we'll see what happens in regards to the folding out of the Housewives, baby. Now, in regards to some other Bravo shows, I want to get into the Real Housewives of Potomac. Oh, that's right. There's not much happening. Because we were on a hiatus, there hasn't been much happening with the Real Housewives of Potomac. But I do want to say that I am very, very, very interested to see how things play out for the rest of the season. I know that the ladies are still looking to spend time with Angel in Colorado, and I think she's hosting the next Girls Get Together. It doesn't look like it's going to be anything that's going to come into the fold the way that viewers are expecting it to, which is always good for reality TV. But I'm interested in the reunion. I'm interested to see how things play with Wendy, and I'm interested to see how things happen with Karen and bringing her back into the fold. Recently, Candace released a statement saying that she is not interested in returning to the show and that there have never been conversations that she's having with production regularly. Candace feels that she's in the right spot right now in regards to her podcast, which kind of pulls her name out of the drawing or the options, if you will, for moving into season 11. With that said, I think we would be having a missed opportunity if Wendy Osefo doesn't continue her storyline so we can see how things unfold in her legal case. It will be up to her to decide if she wants to return. Obviously, we talked about that in the podcast before. But I think next season, maybe bring in some fresh blood. Obviously, Karen Huger is like the talk of the town right now. We want to hear how things are going with her. If she wants to return, because Karen wants to do an interview, and I think she is going to do an interview with Andy Cohen towards the end of the season. So most excited for Karen and most excited to see how the dynamic plays out with these ladies because I do want them to get along. But Stacey, with her QVC ass, is the lead right now. Moving on into another Bravo show. So right now we have the Real Housewives of Potomac, which is airing. We also have the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. Additionally, in the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I want to get into the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City and just draw my opinion that Meredith is getting all the work. And I think the ladies last time when they sat around and were talking about the issue with Meredith, I think they all had different perspectives, excuse me, but someone that kind of seems a little bit messy, and I know that's not any surprise to regular viewers, is Bronwyn. And the reason why I say that is because when they were all discussing the Meredith of it all and like things that were happening with Meredith and like the plane, and I think Mary was coming from a place of concern for her friend without calling Meredith like an addict, like Whitney did. And I think Bronwyn was kind of mute on that, but Whitney is trying to play cleanup because she was acting a fool and went off on Meredith, and I think she handled it the wrong way. I personally do agree with Mary. If you're noticing a difference in your friend, maybe there is something going on with Meredith. But bringing it back to Bronwyn, I think she's doing too much in regards to they just aired out their grievances and Meredith's going through something and clearly there's a lot on her mind. And she drops the bombshell about Meredith's husband and how she was out with, I believe she said with Todd, and they ran into Seth and he was with another woman, which is a huge bombshell here because it's like, okay, so are you saying that he's with a business partner when you're meeting out with Todd, or is he cheating? Who knows? But here's the thing. I think if you're going to be a housewife and you're going to try to bring in controversy on another castmate or whatever, you know, make sure it lands, because obviously we're curious to learn more about that. But Brahma, right now, it was just announced that you and Todd are splitting. So I don't know if this is a deflection thing based on what's going on in her marriage, but it's clearly giving that. And I think moving forward, you know, as the ladies decide to have conversations about Meredith, I think there needs to be a place of coming from a place of understanding. I think with Brittany being a friend on the show and being like kind of a cast member with the ladies, she has her own baggage. And I think Brittany is delivering this season by letting the girls pretty much crash out over her and it working to her advantage in her storyline. But Brittany's not innocent. And I think Meredith has just had enough. And I think there's a missed opportunity here where it's like there's a bunch of hypocrisy going on and not much focus on new information. It's kind of the ladies just focusing on the Brittany and Meredith of it all, or the Meredith and Whitney or Heather of it all. And it's like, we're tired of that. If you girls don't get along, then maybe there needs to be a cast shakeup. Maybe we do need to bring back a housewife or like a Monica or a Jen Shaw to spice things up. Who knows? Because right now it's giving that you girls are just sitting there acting a damn fool about a storyline that doesn't make any sense. Meredith's crying about not being able to talk to her son while she's in Greece. Ladies, you are in Greece. Enjoy your trip, please. You know, as I'm watching it, I'm seeing all the beautiful landscape, the background, and it's giving that you girls are not letting yourselves just be. So, excuse me, we'll see what happens with that, but I'm excited for the Real House of Salt Lake City to continue, but I think it's time for the reunion, because the rest of the season is giving weirdo to me. Anyway, other things happening down the reality TV pipeline this year. Excuse me, I said season because I'm excited, but this year I believe would be, obviously we will have Dance with the Stars, which will come back way later, but we're gonna also get more shows in regards to Bravo. I believe there's like this the Villa with the Shouts of Sunset coming in. I think it's Persian style, the Villa Persian style. So I think my husband and I are gonna check that out. There's also a few other things in the pipeline in terms of some movies that are coming out this year, so I'm excited to get into those. And also, hopefully we'll be getting the Real Housewives of Atlanta trailer soon as they enter their season 17. Now, what the rumors are saying and what pretty much is the tea is that the cast currently exists of Pinky Cole and K. Michelle as the new housewives. In addition to them, we're bringing back all the ladies from last year except for Britt Eady and Kenya Moore. So that means Portia Williams, Shamia, Kelly Farrell. We're also going to have Angela Oakley, Drew Sidora, Phaedra Parks, and Cynthia is also going to come back as a friend. So that'll be interesting to look at. I'm interested to see what Angela Oakley's story is going to be and how she's going to fold in with the ladies. I wonder what Phaedra and Portia are going to give. But most importantly, I'm excited for the new ladies. Obviously, K. Michelle is someone that I'm really excited about because she's so vibrant. She has so much personality. I love her music. But I think on this show, because she brings personality, I think it's going to be almost a breath of fresh air, but more so like a dynamic shift right off the bat, where we're really going to start seeing what these ladies have for each other in terms of getting to know each other. I'm also kind of excited for Drew, because he's been around consistently for some seasons now. Okay, well that was Clock That Reality Tea, and I talked a little bit about some things that are in the pipeline, and let's stick around, because I think we want to get into one more topic here. Hi, tea sippers. I want to talk about an interesting topic, and I believe it's just kind of long overdue. So let's get into it. So I want to talk about queer language, but what was the evolution of queer language? What was it like? So, you hear me say things like clock it or spill that tea or girl please and that kind of thing, but I really want to mention that queer language didn't just appear fully formed online or on TikTok or on Facebook or whatever. It's long a part of like an art form and like a cultural export that was kind of rooted in a lot of people of color who are also a part of our community, but most importantly it was kind of rooted with Black and Latinx and trans people, and especially in the ballroom. But let's start from the beginning. So in the 1920s, pretty much up until the 1930s, we see that queer life is something that is criminalized, meaning you cannot be queer without facing any kind of legal trouble. And during this time, we had popular movie stars like Judy Garland and others. And a lot of queer people were kind of coined as being friends of Dorothy during this time, which was a coded way to ask someone if they were queer. Now, the hanky code didn't really occur until later on, but we started to see handkerchiefs begin to make their debut in regards to signaling how people view each other in a way during this time, but it didn't stick until far, far later on. Now, camp and drag ballroom language comes on later, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. Now, exiting the 1930s, we entered the Great Depression, and we know that a lot of LGBTQ plus people were just trying to survive during this time, so pretty much that was kind of under the radar until the 1940s and 50s, where we started to see a little bit more of the McCarthyism of things and police raids and that kind of thing. But most importantly, the camp humor in regards to just kind of how people presented themselves, started to appear, I would say, in the 1960s, where we started to hear phrases like camp, where people would appear exaggerated and kind of bend the gender spectrum a little bit and kind of use it in a way to survive versus like a way for people to identify. Gay men began using colored items actually in the 70s to distinguish this, but we'll hop into the 60s first. So, during the 60s is where we start to see a little bit more of that resistance and visibility, So, this is pre-Stonewall, so there's some tensions, right? We have the Civil Rights Movement, we have the March on Washington, the assassination of JFK and MLK during this time, and lots of change being promoted. We know that bars and drag queens started to stand up with the Stonewall riots in 1969, but most importantly, some key phrases started to appear. So we started to hear things like queen, which was basically a mainstream term of community members in terms of this pristine or ability to present in a way where it makes you seem regal, right? And then we started to first hear terms like trade, which was a masculine presenting man. Predominantly in metropolitan areas is where the term first started getting used, along with butch and femme, which we saw predominant in the LGBTQ plus community, but specifically to lesbians. And the term cruising was also introduced during this time. Now, at the tail end of the 60s, kind of introduced this liberation of the time where we started to see the handkerchief code that we mentioned kind of come and make its resurgence, but most importantly, it became a little bit more symbolic in terms of how it was standardized across the community. So we see things with like the left pocket in the right pocket, insinuating if you're top or a bottom, if you're active or passive. Colors will be come into play. For example, blue meaning that you were more interested in certain ways of sex, in terms of also other colors are like red and yellow and that kind of thing. And then there was this communication system that was pretty much created in terms of letting people know you were queer without the use of smartphone devices and that kind of thing. And we start to see the ballroom culture start to make its complete resurgence towards the end of the 70s after kind of the disco era. And in the midst of this kind of coming into fruition in the 1980s was the birth of modern queer slang. So that's when the AIDS crisis was abundant, but the underground ballroom culture started to be like the powerhouse in a new wave of introducing drag and competition and just kind of a way for people to create a sense of community. So in the ballroom culture, we start to see terms like slay, which emerges as a term meaning to dominate a category or to outperform or to just stun the room. You want to slay the room and show this regal powerness, kind of like when we say queen to someone. We also see terms like serve coming into play, where it's more so about to really serve a look, to deliver a look, to show the attitude of this look, to make this look or appearance or how you're presenting show up with excellence, so you can also serve in a performance with excellence. Basically to show in a way where you are exemplifying greatness. Clock it, which is kind of what we use to name the podcast here, which is actually very, very, very awesome that we are incorporating that. But clock it started as a way to just say to notice something, or especially like a flaw or like something that's detailed. So when you're clocking a tea, you're spilling information or you're really getting into the nitty gritty, specifically noticing the flaws and the mishaps along with that in your gossip, and you really want to serve to the point of serve and get your information out of there. Sachet, which is to walk with flair, which is popularized by RuPaul later on in ballroom, obviously derived from ballroom culture, but popularized by RuPaul in the media. We have terms like work, which means to command and to perform and embody confidence. And work is spelled W-E-R-K and is then used in ways where you say you better work. We also have phrases like legendary, which is the status that is earned in the ballroom of someone who is basically in a house or a community that is established to put on shows to show off your ability to present and express and live in this way. So ballroom language has so many influences in our culture, but most importantly, just the black, queer, trans space, or the brown space, which is basically rooted in survival and chosen family. It's interesting that we also came up with our own language and still continue to use phrases like that still to this day. In the 1990s, we start to see more terms like yes or like fierce and that kind of thing, which is basically affirming joy and approval. And fierce is something that went more mainstream. Fierce is something that we hear amongst a description of like, you know, an animal and like kind of like their appearance and if they're fierce or if they're like kind of like going against the grain. But in regards to queer culture, fierce is something more along the lines of showing resiliency. We also see terms like shade and reading, which entered a pop culture lexicon later on. But shade in terms of like throwing a form of discourse where you're kind of like being, you're kind of, you know, being shady, right? Or kind of being a little disrespectful, but not in a way where it's like you're kind of in a way just kind of passively, you know, being dismissive to someone in a way, while also holding down the truth of it all, you know. And reading is something that you do when you're really trying to get someone together, as we like to use in the gay community as well, which is another term of really trying to give someone the business. And realness, you know, presenting a category with conviction, which is rooted in ballroom, but realness is also, you know, vibrancy and showing up as your authentic self. Now, In the 2000s and 2010s, that's when we start to hear the no tea, no shade, the spill the tea, the work and the slay. All that becoming part of mainstream culture, because that's when we have RuPaul's talk show, but we also start to see the RuPaul's Drag Race, which entered the lexicon, if you will, in around the 2010s. And which kind of takes a wave into how gay culture is being looked at, especially on a global perspective, but it's also a way for language to just be everywhere and for people to get introduced to other ways of being. There is some pushback to say that, language is also kind of used in a way where people don't understand the roots of it, obviously with ballroom culture and then where it first started. But it's a good way for us to just remember that, there's always a backstory to popular phrases and coined phrases that we use. And, a lot of it goes back to the resilience of communities and how we speak to each other. So in the 2020s, we see more things like the TikTok and coming along, and the Gen Z generation kind of making cultural reclamations of how they view the world. And specifically, is more information that's interchangeable online quickly. So we see phrases like "it's giving" or "mother" or "period" with a T, and "slay." And slay is something that, if you haven't noticed, has been very consistent, meaning you've outperformed in a category, you stunned, you embodied this excellence, your resilience, you left no crumbs. It's not just good job. It's more like you annihilated this, you destroyed this, you are supreme. And it's interesting to see the resurgence of slay coming into the 2020s. And the phrase mother, as mentioned before, was something that's rooted in ballroom culture, but we're seeing a resurgence of that because of the media, but more so because it's a part of Gen Z's language in regards to phrases like "it's giving" or "clock it." And it's important to know the root of all these phrases in a way where they were codes for us to communicate with each other, and not necessarily as a way for the mainstream to take it over and make their own cultural lens out of it in regards to what it really means to our community, which is rooted in a lot of Black queer performance and survival. So thanks for listening, and I hope this was very informative. Hi everyone. So the last topic I wanted to discuss was on Nicki Minaj, or as I call her, Maga Minaj. Take a listen. So Nicki Minaj decided to attend a Turning Point USA event, and no one was really prepared for what we heard, but Nicki praised Trump and JD Vance, calling them role models. And she got tired of being pushed around, apparently, so she decided to lean more into other names, like calling Vance an assassin. And, Erica Kirk had to play a little bit of cleanup. Take a listen.
Well, I have the utmost respect and admiration for our president. He has, I don't know if he even knows this, but he's given so many people hope that there's a chance to beat the bad guys and to win, and to do it with your head held high and your integrity intact. He's from Queens, New York, like me. So, but what it's shown me personally is sometimes, even in the worst feeling times in your life, you think that you're never going to come back from it. But you do. And our president shows that. He's been through.
So he's showing that because he's from Queens, New York? Okay, Nikki. I'm going to continue to let her go off, and then we're going to definitely talk about this. Because clearly she has woken up somewhere completely off kilter.
Understand what it feels like. That person is a human being. They have a family who has to read those lies. And that's not, and it's just not fair. But this administration is full of people with heart and soul. And they make me proud of them. Our vice president, he makes me, well, I love both of them, but they're both powerful men, smart, strong, all of that. But both of them have a very uncanny ability to be someone that you relate to. I can relate to them. When I hear them speak, I know that they're one of us. Like, I know that they're not. Don't you guys agree?
Absolutely not. And here's why I don't agree, Nicki Minaj. What the hell do you mean by you look at them and you can relate to them? Baby, I don't know who hit Nicki's head, but not all of us in this world are millionaires like you, baby. And another thing, you want to sit up on that stage with that hoodie hat on talking about what's going on with the president and how he's a great person. Girl, are you a great person? Because last time I checked, you decided to climb your ass over to the courthouse and marry a pedophile and then go overtime to try to protect him because he's your man. Girl, he's not our man. We don't have to like anything that you're doing. Another thing to shade your ass on. Girl, were you not rapping about eating box and playing within the LGBTQ plus community and living for the dolls? Well, newsflash to you, Nicki Minaj, the dolls have turned on you, and you should be absolutely ashamed of yourself. Let's really clock it, since you want to talk about being from Queens. The real struggle of Americans are those who have to struggle because of their circumstances and work extra hard the way that you did to get out of their circumstances. And you know what? Just because you made it to the top and you can pop off and talk your shit does not mean you can go on that stage and pretend like these people in this administration are great people because of what they're doing to marginalized groups. You should be ashamed of yourself. The LGBTQ plus community has kept you getting a check from the beginning, baby. It doesn't matter for when you started with Lil Wayne or anybody. We were there with you from the beginning because you were artistic. We looked at you as a role model because you represented something that we all saw in ourselves, the ability to be different. And now you want to sit up on this stage and act like you are the most conservative woman ever and acting like you care about children. Baby, if you cared about children, you would have let that nigga go who you decided to climb into the courthouse with and get hitched with, who was accused of sexual assault on a minor. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about Nicki Minaj, how you also decided that you wanted to talk about someone else's kids who are of color. Meanwhile, you were at this conference talking about how we need to accept white kids for who they are. Baby, there is no attack on white kids. I don't know who hit your head, baby, but just because you read the Bible and you think the Bible is law, don't let the Bible and Trump get you completely canceled. Oh, wait, that's too late. Nicki, you are done. We are not returning as fans of you. You can kiss your career goodbye. You can also kiss the fact that you are deciding to align yourself with a hate group organization that preaches hate towards children. Gender affirming care is not specific to medical treatment and surgery. It's about having parents be responsible for what that looks like. That's between the parents and their doctor and their kids. Stay y'all asses out of people's business and maybe you'll go to heaven. Maybe you'll go to heaven. Because right now, it's giving bottom feeder ass, sitting up there with collect the check CEO mama after her husband just got murdered. And she wants to sit up here and act like you both are besties when last time I checked, her husband talked mad dog about Nicki. So let's not do this. Let's not, try to make it seem like we're such good people with our millions of dollars and God this and Trump that. Girl, Trump doesn't care about you, baby. What he cares about is that black vote going into 2026 because he knows there are some stranglers in the black community that like to be hateful, just like you, Nicki. Just like you. And guess what? We already know they exist. And we don't have to associate ourselves with you, with this hate organization, or with any homophobic and transphobic people in our lives because guess what? This is America, baby. And whatever planet you're living on, go ahead and stay there. Because last time I checked, ain't nobody really checking for you. So that's what I have to say about that. I also want to talk a little bit about how she dropped the now infamous assassin comment about Vance. Was that an insinuation? Was that to troll people? Was that it? Nicki, we know what you're doing. We know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. We know what you're doing. Erica knows what you're doing. The world knows what you're doing. Hang it up. Get out of our face. Vance, you probably are part of making sure that Erica's husband got murdered. Since we want to talk conspiracy theories, all of y'all need to hang it up. Us in the middle of America, the ones that you think voted for you, don't like you. Your little red counties all over the country are being fed misinformation and being fed information to protect pedophilia by Nicki Minaj, the Trump administration, and all these people who know what they do behind closed doors. It's sickening. It's gross. It's conniving. There's much happening behind the scenes, but trust and believe. Come 2026, when those checks and balances hit, we are going to be finding out much more, and we will be seeing handcuffs. That's what we'll be seeing.